So Bill, if you live in a trailer, but that's not a tiny home,
Not technically. That's a manufactured home by definition.
and it doesn't sit on a foundation, but some of them do?
Some do, but they are inspected and constructed to HUD standards and have a HUD certificate, where a tiny home is just constructed and typically does not have that standard, and is just built using typical construction methods and practices.
Oh, okay, thanks.
I have another, sorry,
Randy.
this is just so interesting, like, there's a thing with the containers that they're retrofitting to be like tiny homes.
Yes.
Where does that fall? Because it doesn't have a foundation, but it doesn't have wheels. What's that?
They can be placed on a foundation.
Okay.
And if you place it on a permanent foundation, that would be permissible in any residential zone that we have today.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay, I was just kind of, this tiny home thing kind of intrigued me.
The next question addresses the city code. I thought that was pretty interesting too. So this one, and just 79% approved of providing tiny homes as an affordable housing option, and 16% didn't. So the next question, so the Moscow City Code puts restrictions on the number of homes that are allowed on a certain size property and the number of off-street parking spaces for automobiles that are required. Because tiny homes are smaller than typical family housing, the commission asked if residents would support amending the public code. That would make it so that planned unit development wouldn't have to go through public hearing and get approval from council each time they wanted to build a tiny home. So that was the basis of this question. And 59% said yes to amending the code. 34% said no. I think just a caveat to interpreting that no number is that if you don't support tiny homes in the first place, which 16% in the last question didn't, I don't think you would probably support amending the city code to allow for this. So that's just one thing to consider in the no portion of this question. But yeah. Any questions about that? Okay. Moving along, this is from the Sustainable Environment Commission. It asked if residents supported a pesticide-free park and/or buffer zone around children's playgrounds. Pesticides has been kind of a common concern in this community. 31% strongly agreed and 36% agreed. So the vast majority is in support of these pesticide-free parks or buffer zones. The next question they asked was citizens' general concern about climate patterns on the Palouse. 41% said they were very concerned. 27% were concerned. 9% were somewhat concerned. 9% were neutral. And 10% were not concerned. If there's no questions, moving on to Transportation Commission.
You know, I think, I'll make one comment on that, Trevor. I think right there is a good indication, as looking through the total numbers on the surveys, you have roughly 30, 66, 73, you have 94% that took this survey that either had some college or an associate degree or bachelor's degree or professional degree or graduate degree. And so I think that is a reflection of it, because I think our community is on top of being smart about climate changes and climate control and all these different factors, not only here on the Palouse, but everywhere in the world. I think it's, that's what I just thought I'd put that point out.
I think so too. So the Transportation Commission asked about the bike share program. The bike share program is a service that the city of Moscow is considering, wherein the city would provide bicycles at stations throughout the city that would be available for short-term rental through a daily, monthly, or annual pass. 25% strongly agree that they would like to see a bike share program. 31% agreed. So it's relatively popular. It's a pretty clear majority. So I think this will be definitely, I've done some research into the bike share program with Jen, and I think this will be something that we strongly consider in the future. So moving along, this question asks which transportation system investments that citizens feel are the highest priority. And they were able to mark all the questions. The highest priorities were maintaining roadways, safe arterial crossings, and roadway improvements to ease traffic, as well as safer and more accessible sidewalks and intersections. The tree commission, this is our final commission. This question asks, I support the city's efforts to enhance Moscow's urban forest by, and they gave a number of choices. They were able to mark more than one. The choices were drought tolerance info in the street tree selection guide, which 64% said they'd like to see. Working with adjacent landowners to plant street trees was 65% said they'd like to see. Planning for a replacement of aging trees through planting, got 76% response. And developing a food forest, 46% responded they would like to see. And then this one asks which publications and workshops citizens would like to see the Tree Commission offer. 60% wanted a publication about selecting trees appropriate to Moscow. 59% wanted a publication and/or workshops on water-wise selection of trees. And 52% want publications and/or workshops on proper tree planting. So now we'll get into the demographics of the study. Here's our employment and enrollment trend measured with the citizen survey over time. In terms of employment, for whatever reason, 2016 seems to be an outlier year. If you take out 2016, all the 2017 numbers are just about the mean of 02 through 2014. 29% that responded were not employed, 18% were part-time, and 50% were full-time. So it's a pretty consistent trend. And then same with enrollment. The trends were pretty much the same. 83% weren't enrolled, 3% were enrolled part-time in school, and 12% were full-time students.
One wonders if having another category on employment called retired would be beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Art, you bring up a good point, because when you look at this, I got the stats here somewhere, 21%, or 16% were 65 to 74, and 8% were 75, so you had 24% that were over 65 years old
Right.
that took this,
Right.
completed the survey.
That's why they want more programs at Parks and Rec for that age group, right?
We need curling.
So then we also track residency numbers. Again, these were pretty consistent, although this survey was the most responses we had of people that lived here for more than 20 years. So again, I think that's a good sign. I think that trend's moving in the right direction, where people are living here long term.
Yeah, I got a comment to make about that, too. If you look at that, if you take the lived here 11 years, more than 11 years, and more than 20 years, you got 59%. People that were 6 and to 10 was 10%. So that's right there, 69%. That's a huge number. I would think the things that they're talking about here would be pretty important to those people, because they're people that have been here for a while, some of them for decades.
I agree. All right, and this is, Mayor touched on this. This is the education level. The red and the orange are the biggest pieces of the pie, and that's a good thing. The red is graduate professional degrees, and the orange is bachelor degrees. 36% had graduate professional degrees, and 33% had bachelor's degrees, for a combined 69%. Moscow remains one of the best educated cities in the country. And in my view, I think that's our biggest strength.